That brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Gallion, Smart Start Update.
Good evening. I would like to start off this update by recognizing our finance team. Our finance team, we just received information that they received a much deserved recognition from um, GFOA. You may have recalled that Mark oftentimes referred to the goal of the finance committee to meet this threshold and the criteria to be established with the GFOA organization that oversees budgets and ensures their alignment to not only the student achievement priorities but other priorities in the district. And so that process requires the finance team to submit supplemental reports and documents to show not only the alignment, but to show how all the money is accounted for through the various systems that we have, all toward making sure that we meet our goals of the strategic plan. So, in addition to the supplemental materials, they had to submit the interim budgets, they had to submit the strategic plan, and other documents that help support and show how they're working toward that goal. So I want to commend them. They worked tirelessly on that goal and continue to work to perfect that document. For those of you who have been on the board for a while, you will see that there's been a major transformation in how the information is presented. And so that was one of Mark's big goals that he was working for. And even though he's gone and retired, we want to commend him and the team for the work that they did. So kudos to the finance department. Oh, so before we get into the presentation of the Smart Start update, I just wanted to point out that this presentation will highlight a few things. One, that we will return back to traditional instructional format, face to face, and those types of things. Not to say that we won't continue to use technology, we will, but it'll be embedded within the traditional setting. Another option will we will continue to offer the virtual school option, which is different than remote, you may recall. And so we will continue, but that will require a commitment from the families to engage in that program for throughout the year. And then I am pleased to announce that the senior leadership and other leaders in the district have been working and meeting and looking at data to inform our decision around the mask requirements. And while we know there are other districts and communities that have decided to engage in that process differently, we have decided that our initial approach to the mask requirements will be optional for all families, but we want to make the board aware as well as the community aware that just as recent as Friday, the data has changed quite a bit. We are seeing some trends in the area. Not that the trends are matching the state, but we are seeing some trends that may suggest we may have to revisit that decision based on this discussions that we'll be having with our health department. So we'll continue to do what we've always been doing, which is looking at the data, looking at the trends, and listening to our local health departments and trying to stay in alignment with what's going on in the community. So right now, mask will be optional, and we're gonna kick that into effect August 1st. So our next board meeting, we will not have to have masks on. So, all right. The the distancing in terms of bringing kids back, we know that we won't be able to adhere to the 6 feet, but we will do the best we can to adhere to the 3 feet protocol. And so, with that said, I'm going to toss it over to Soren Gajewski, our Chief Academic Officer, who will go over some highlights of areas in the plan that may have changed.
Thank you, Dr. Gallion. You covered some of the key pieces, the key highlights to the 21-22 Smart Start plan. Again, this is a plan that will be available for the public to review as well very shortly. Going over some of the key highlights is that flexibility that Dr. Gallion mentioned. Again, this pandemic situation is not over, and so we will be flexible and responsive to data that changes over time. Our instruction does return to normal teaching and learning expectations, and one of the positives out of all of this is we do have one-to-one devices for our students, and that opens up some great opportunities as well for our students and instruction. As Dr. Gallion mentioned, virtual option will be available as it has been in the past for students who wish to make that commitment over the course of the year to be a part of that program. That is different than what we had done last year with remote instruction and that concurrent teaching. In the event that we do have students that may be quarantined or are sick and could be sick with any situation or just may not be attending school, our teachers will continue to utilize the Google Classroom for their assignments and their directions. And so students will be able to keep in touch with what's going on in the classroom, and teachers will also be vigilant to work with students when they return. Also, if we do come into a situation where we have to close a school or a class has to be out on quarantine, the remote instruction will take over at that time. So we will pivot and adjust as necessary to make sure our students have that access to quality education. Also, to continue on what we did last year is to continue to have that layered prevention measures throughout our district. And those include promoting vaccination, encouraging mask use, physical distancing to the extent possible, screening testing, improved ventilation, hand washing and respiratory etiquette, staying home when sick, contact tracing, isolation, quarantine, and cleaning and disinfectant. So that will continue as we have been doing, and the Smart Start 2020, those protocols will continue to take place for next year. And then finally, the communication for this adjustment to this plan for 2021 will begin following this discussion tonight. And so we'll utilize our website, social media, and email to communicate these changes and these highlights for our families. So I do have a few people with us tonight. If you've got any questions on what I shared, we can take those now.
All right. Mr. Hanser, you have your hand up, and then we'll go with Ms. McKenna.
Two questions. One, if individuals want to wear masks, will the district continue to provide masks to staff and students, visitors to the building, et cetera?
Correct. The district has, utilizing our ESSER funds, ordered our PPE masks being just one of them for use this fall, and those will be readily available as well as being distributed to all of our staff and students on the first day of school.
Second and final question, Soren, no rooming and Zooming this year for our staff and students. So as a parent, not me anymore, but as a parent in the community, if my child is homesick, I should not be expecting that my child's going to be able to drop in via video to watch my teacher engage. They're going to be, we're going to be doing what we did before, which is if your child is out ill, there's Google Classroom availability, and teachers will provide support and assistance as they have before this pandemic started. Is that an accurate statement?
That's pretty accurate. Just in addition to that now, though, because we have our one-to-one devices, we are going to have a better availability to access what's going on in that school day for children, rather than being kind of out there until it's time to come back. So we will utilize Google Classroom for that.
Right, but there's not going to be there's no live streaming going on at
Correct.
the time. All right,
Correct.
that's it. Thank you very much, and I'm all done, Mr. O'Connell.
All right. So Ms. McKenna, you're up.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify, so the mask being optional, is that also included in the buses, and is that throughout the district, no matter what activity they're in, and how much social distancing they have?
So as it relates to school activities and school guidance, we will have the optional. Now the transportation is they're regulated by a different regulation, which is federal. So they will have to follow different guidelines as it relates to transportation. Shannon, you want to chime in on that?
Sure. I would also say the WIAA for athletic events has a set of guidance as well that's dependent on case rate and rate of spread. And so the rules for masking may vary or change based on WIAA guidance as well.
So I'm hearing, because I thought when the board had voted on the transportation, I think it was without the mask. I couldn't remember the social distancing, so I wasn't sure. So they'll be clarified for the students when they come back as far as what they need to do.
So again, there's currently a federal executive order that mandates masks to be worn in all mass transportation, and that order specifically cites school buses. So we don't have the ability to waive that requirement at this time.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Goey.
Few questions. So based on you saying that there won't be any of the Zooming, no hybrid, correct? I just want to, because
That's correct.
that may be the most stressful form of teaching I've ever experienced. And any teacher out there who did it knows exactly what I'm talking about. So with the virtual commitment, so are we going to ask for like a semester commitment, or are we going to say like at the semester you can switch if you so choose? How will that work if someone say wants to change? Because I know there were people, one day the kids are like, yeah, I'm not going in. And then the next day they'd be like, yeah, we want to go back. So
They won't have that type of flexibility, but I would imagine there is a natural break. Sean, you want to talk?
Yeah, we are looking at that semester. Really, it's its own program and its own scope and sequence. It's not something that benefits children if they're jumping in and jumping out of it. So we will be upfront about that and being very clear about what that program is like, so that can help them make the decision to do so.
Okay. I'll ask one more and then I'll let somebody else ask. I got like two more after that. Our quarantine rule is going to be different if someone say provides proof of vaccination. So like if a parent comes forward and says my child is vaccinated, but they were exposed to someone who was in the classroom, so therefore they're a primary contact, if they prove that they were vaccinated, are they quarantined?
Molly, do you want to explain?
Yeah, so as far as vaccines go, by the way, I'm Molly Shimandera. I was the interim health services supervisor since Kim left. Now Allie just joined us today. So stepping in just kind of help answer questions here. So if families provide that information and we are able to double check that using the Wisconsin immunization database, if students are fully vaccinated and they are not displaying symptoms, they will not need to quarantine. If at any time following, those guidelines of the 14 days after exposure, if they develop any symptoms at that time, they would need to stay home and we would recommend testing.
Okay. I will let someone else ask questions and come back later.
Okay, Ms. Doxy, you're up next.
I have a follow-up on the quarantine question. I was wondering, I'd asked for this data before, but I didn't get it. I'm not sure if it's something that we have, and that's why I didn't get it. But I was wondering if we know, out of the number of kids that we quarantined last year, how many of those kids actually ended up testing positive for COVID?
Not have that data. I'm thinking there's something that we could get or go off of from looking at all of our because we have contact tracing boards by school, so we could pull those numbers, but I don't have it off the top of my head. I'd have to.
The data that I can share with you through the end of the school year that I have just at my fingertips is that we had 111 students in the district test positive last school year. Those were at 17 of our 28 schools. And of those 111 students, there were at least 15 families with multiple positive tests. So we certainly can provide the board and one of the superintendent's Friday updates, the additional information you're requesting relative to the number of quarantines compared to the number of positives. I apologize. Okay. I didn't bring that data with me tonight.
Okay. Yeah, I would appreciate that, and the reason is that I think there has been some data out there that suggests that the quarantine is the length of the quarantine is maybe a little excessive and not necessarily reducing the spread in the way that the risk benefit, the having the students out of school for that 2-week period of time versus the actual chances of those kids contracting COVID from that contact that they had at school. So that's we want to keep kids in the school building as much as possible during the school year, particularly since we're not going to have the hybrid, which I agree is a very good thing that we're not going to have the hybrid. So, because of that, they're not going to have that remote option. We want them in the classroom as much as possible. So I would if we're going to require all students that are exposed to quarantine for 14 days, I would like to know that there's some efficacy behind that. So that.
You're on mute, Chin.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, you guys. One of the things that I would mention that the state health department shared with school districts on Friday is that the rate of transmission among students under age 17, that percentage mirrored the rate of spread with 18 to 49-year-olds, 50 to 64, and over 65. So this belief that COVID was not spreading among youth is not consistent with the statewide data. So it is why the district is maintaining the position to continue to be very data driven and work with our health department so that we make sure we're positioning ourselves in the best possible way to keep our staff and our students safe as the pandemic continues to be a challenge for all of us.
That is all. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Bowling, you had your hand raised. I don't see it now, but if you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, I did have a question. Still piggybacking on the quarantining questions. Where can our families find our quarantining protocols?
So that information is currently available on the district website. We're currently in the process of revising all of those documents for the current school year, and we'll have that available in the next week or so. And we'll be pushing that information out to families.
Okay, thank you very much. I am done.
I have a couple, and then I know Mr. Coey wanted a second time around. So we have now distributed Chromebooks to all the students. How will we be using that technology in the coming school year with normal classroom operation, face-to-face operation? How do you see that role, the technology?
Obviously, it would vary from class to class. I think you heard the two principals in their presentation say that they will continue to encourage staff to use the technology and take advantage of the opportunities that have been presented to them, and also learn from the lessons that they were taught during this past year and a half. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to move the needle in terms of the use of technology in the district. Certainly the COVID was untimely, but it also opened up an opportunity for us to go one-to-one, which we've been trying to work toward for a number of years. So we're going to encourage staff to continue to engage with technology We don't have a prescribed approach at this moment.
I just want to jump in real quick. We do have a program, I think you heard about it from a lot of different schools this year, called IXL. And that is a skill building software. So IXL will continue next year, and we will be using their diagnostics as well as their skill pathways. And it will make the one-to-one technology will make that a whole lot easier. There will be certain times during the day when kids would break off into small groups and kids would kind of rotate through different stations or centers to be able to work on that. In the middle and high school, it might be during advisory or a homeroom period. But there are ideas as to when they are going to use that. There's also plentiful amount of other apps that we're going to continue to use. And the teachers, like Dr. Gallion said, it really was an opportunity for the teachers to really explore and integrate a lot of the technology we've had for years. We expect that to keep going. It's just going to be now to break up that block of time, that class period, to be able to do, for the kids to be able to do that during the school day.
Let me follow up by throwing out a statement, and you can agree or disagree. In wealthier school districts, it is likely that before COVID, one-on-one technology existed, and that we are catching up to what wealthier districts had prior to COVID. True statement?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Coe, second time.
I'll just throw out there, I'm excited about being one-to-one myself. I mean, now we're not limited. Like, there's tons of things that we can do. So I hope a lot of the teachers keep some lessons that I'm sure they used. You're not limited. So this is a great thing for us. I mean, the last year was chaotic. At least we have this to be happy about, I would say. And you're nodding, so I think you agree. The only two quick questions I have is, and I think I brought this up in the past over the course of the year, is for the dashboard. Is that something we plan to keep? And if so, could we add a cumulative data piece? I mean, it's just adding one line, but that's something that I would like to see added if possible.
And
So the district is still reviewing the utility of the dashboard and its helpfulness with our health departments, as well as with a safety team from the REU. And so right now our plan is not to add that additional piece, but I'm happy to take it back to that committee as we review and discuss it.
Okay.
And bring back any updates.
Cumulative data can be useful at times. I know it's not always, I like that you always had the weekly piece, and that was always nice to see. Some other districts didn't have that. I just think cumulative data can be useful at times.
Yeah, so I just, for clarity, the challenge of that is that dashboard is reporting anybody who called in sick to the district. So the reason that the cumulative is less informative is it is not specific that you're absent for a COVID related illness per se. And so we'll continue to try to flesh out how to do that to be as transparent as possible.
And obviously we cannot ask somebody why you're out, I presume, correct? So we can't just be like, yeah, you're out.
Ask whether they can share with it or not. What we can't do is identify symptoms
Just
that are COVID related or virus related.
Just in case anybody's listening. This is my last question, and then I am done. The masking, albeit I understand it with high school in 7 and 8, the vaccine isn't available for pre-K through 6 yet. Can you explain the decision on that? That is all I have.
It's really intended to give families the option. As you would probably acknowledge that in the community, families are already exercising that option already. And so instead of the school district trying to take a stance one way or the other, we wanted to give our community some flexibility. And we've heard that feedback across the district. We've heard people say mandatory mask. We've heard people say optional. And we've heard people say no mask at all. So in order to be responsive to that and to the needs of our community, we just wanted to provide options. And barring some mandatory policy by the state or the local health agency, we'll probably continue to have flexibility.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gallion. I am done, Mr. O'Connell.
All right. I think at this point, I just want to say kind of where we are in terms of our board process with this. So under the superintendent's consent agenda is a copy of the plan. We will continue to discuss the plan through the August meetings with the intention of a more formal endorsement, similar to what we did with the Smart Start plan for the prior year, later in the August business meeting. So think on that as we work our way through this for the coming weeks, with the objective of having, solid board policy in place as school resumes. If you have more discussions, we'll, welcome them and take them up, beginning with the work session on the 2nd. Anything more on that, Dr. Gallion? Anything more to add?
No, and we welcome any feedback that we can get from the board and the community.